Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We're going to continue in Luke's Gospel, chapter 7. John the Baptist. This is an interesting story about John the Baptist. He was beheaded, and as we know the story, he was beheaded over pure nonsense, pure foolishness, by an oath that Herod made foolishly to his illegitimate stepdaughter because he had married his brother's wife. And that was a whole scandal there. And so his Herod's wife nursed a grudge against John because John would preach and proclaim that the marriage was lawful. So you get into politics, the power that people have, and as a result, when the daughter did it was obviously some sexual dance, and he was so pleased that he did this oath and said, "Whatever you promise, whatever you ask for, I will give you up to half my kingdom." And she came back and she said, prompted by her mother, "Give me the head of John the Baptist." So you see the twistedness of these people. What power can do, what sin could do, and especially when you have that kind of depravity and you're in power. So let's get in it. Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7. Should have had this up already, but all right. So Luke chapter 7. And I'm going to pick it up at verse number 18. It says, then John's disciples told him about all these things. Now, he's talking about John here. Okay. And again, at this time, he's in jail. He's been in prison. So John summoned two of his disciples. Now, they're telling them about all of the works of Jesus. Now, remember, John is Jesus' cousin. Either second or third cousin, and he's 6 months older than Jesus. That God called him to pave the way, and as John said, he was sent to pave the way in terms of the people's heart. I'll come back to that because that's important. And so he said, so John was told by God, the one that you see the Spirit descending on and resting on, that's the one. That's the Messiah. That's the Son of God. That's the Lamb of God. Now, all that's important because notice now, so John summoned two of his disciples and sent them to the Lord asking, are you the one who is to come, or should we look for someone else? And when the men reached him, they said, John the Baptist sent us to ask you, are you the one who is to come, or should we look for someone else? Now, what's interesting about this question is that we could surmise, as John is sitting in prison. And of course, when you're suffering and for you, the world stops. And then, of course, in reality, the world keeps moving on. So when you then, but when you're in this kind of suffering, you're isolated, you're lonely, and then despair could set in. The question that John is asking is what many Israelites asked during the time of Jesus. And so hearing the preaching seen the miracles, the natural conclusion was that this is the Messiah. And they were right. Jesus was the Messiah. Where they were wrong was not understanding the times and the periods that God has put into his power, not understanding that. You remember in Acts, before Jesus ascends to heaven, the disciples asked him, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel at this time? So when Jesus came, you had all of the Old Testament prophecies that prophesied about the restoration of Israel. And now here they see that Jesus is manifested in the flesh, the Messiah. Except he's not riding on a white charger. He's not coming in the splendor of a king. And so John is asking the question, are you the one? Now, here's where I will fault John, because John, unlike most people, did not have the revelation that he had. I mean, God himself told him Jesus was the one. When we have these kind of questions, and let's just kind of go, let's broaden this. When you have this kind of question, let's say you're going through some kind of disparity. And as I said, life stops for you. If you're in the hospital, if you're sick to whatever degree, life stops for you. Like I said, when you're in your trials, life stops for you. You're laid off of a job, you can't make payments. Again, life, in a sense, the world slows for you. Now, some people will question God. And here's where it gets, while God is merciful, but people will question God. God, why are you letting me go through this? And the problem with asking that question is not understanding, or you not having the insight that God will provide. See, the solution should be, while you may be questioning, why am I going through this? And even God, why are you allowing me to go through this? You're asking God, and that's the thing where he is God. So if you go back to the lessons of Job, and Job, I'm going to say probably the only man in the Bible where God says that he was upright. Well, he wasn't the only man. I'm putting it in the context of the only man who suffered like Job, to the degree of Job, who was, by God's standards, innocent. In other words, God said he didn't do anything wrong. But Job never lost his integrity. He might have questioned God, but he never lost his integrity. Now, you add to this, in John's case, as he's asking, are you the one, or should we look for another? John should have absolutely knew that Jesus was the one. God had told him this. God had revealed this revelation to John. So watch how Jesus responds, though. Now, let me just say this. God is always merciful. God is merciful. When people say that they're angry at God, God doesn't care about that. But he is merciful. When people curse God, he doesn't care about that. But he is merciful. That's the goodness of God. He's merciful. So he doesn't care about our tantrums, but he's merciful. All right, so verse 20 says, when the men reached him, they said, John the Baptist sent us to ask you, are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another? Verse 21, at that time, Jesus healed many people of diseases, plagues, and evil spirits. And he granted sight to many blind people. He replied to them. In other words, here's what Jesus did. They asked the question, you go, okay, hey, sit down. Front row, get up, get up. You, sit down, make room for these people. And then he heals people. He performs the works of the Messiah. He says, now go and report to John these things you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, those with skin diseases are healed. The deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor are told the good news. And anyone who is not offended because of me is blessed. That's his reply. In other words, faith. In other words, belief. Keep faith. Keep the faith. That's his message to John. Right? He doesn't even remind John of the revelation he had. He just said, look, you want to know if I'm the one? That's it right there. And so the conclusion of faith then would be, all right, here are my expectations of Jesus. This is what I'm expecting him to be. Okay, he's not expecting it, especially during this time. He's not expecting that. Does that change the fact that he's the Messiah? Now, let me broaden this again. Same thing. Is God any less God because he doesn't meet your expectation? Because your life did not turn out how you hoped or expect for it to be? Or because tragedy befell you, hardships befell you? Did that change God? So the very first thing is, our position should be one of humility before God. Period. He's God. I don't understand it, but God is God. And so he dismissed him. He sends them back to John with that. But look at this, verse 24. After John's messengers left, he began to speak to the crowds about him. Now watch this. Why did he wait? Why did he wait for them to get like out of sight? You know, Jesus looking. He's looking. Are they gone? Okay. Now he turns. I'm ad-libbing here, but he now turns to them, and it's going to heap a lot of praise on John. Here's my question. Why didn't he do that in front of his disciples so that they can go back and go, Jesus really raved about you, John. Jesus, he spoke highly of you. You're the man, John. Right? He left, he sent them away with a message that strengthens John's faith. He says, what did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swaying in the wind? What did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft robes? Look, those who are splendidly dressed and live in luxury are in royal palaces. What then did you go out and see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, far more than a prophet. This is the one that was written about. Look, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare your ways before you. I tell you that among those born of a woman, no one is greater than John, but the least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. Now, notice the wonderful praise about John, right? And no doubt John would have loved to hear that. But why was John, and notice this praise here though, why is John, by Jesus standard, okay, by Jesus standard, why is John the greatest prophet? When you think about all of the great men of the Old Testament, like Abraham, Moses, Elijah, all these great men, David, you know, why was John the greatest? And again, this is by Jesus standard. One thing is that he turned the hearts of the people, and he turned the hearts of the people to the Lord. And he did that without miracles, without performing miracles. His message. So, verse 29, and when all the people, including the tax collectors, heard this, They acknowledged God's way of righteousness because they had been baptized with John's baptism. But since the Pharisees and experts in the law had not been baptized by him, they rejected the plan of God for themselves. Now that's kind of a commentary thing that Luke slips in here, right? That the Pharisees, those who should have known the law, notice they were experts, okay? They were experts in the law. Why didn't they see who John the Baptist was? Why didn't they see who Jesus was? Notice he says this, they reject the plan of God for themselves. They reject it. Now, look at what Jesus says here. To what then should I compare the people of this generation? And what are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling to each other. We played the flute for you, but you didn't dance. We sang a lament, but you didn't weep. For John the Baptist did not come. For John the Baptist did not come eating and drinking. For John the Baptist did not come eating bread or drinking wine. And you say he has a demon. Okay? The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by all of her children. That's a very interesting statement, too. Wisdom is vindicated by her children. Let me just say this. You never have to brag about your wisdom. Your wisdom will vindicate itself. It will be shown. So a lot of young people, you really make the effort to you want to be heard. You want to be acknowledged. And sometimes you have knowledge, but no wisdom. Wisdom will always be vindicated by its children, its actions, its protocol. You don't have to say how wise you are. I mean, you can look at a person's life and you can tell how wise they are. And as you go and you read the book of Proverbs, you can look at a fool. You can look at a fool and you can tell the lifestyle of a fool. You can tell the actions of a fool, right? Now he says John the Baptist did not come eating bread or drinking wine, and you say he had a demon, right? So they criticized John the Baptist. First of all, now get this. They criticized two righteous men. And the interesting thing about this is it wasn't about their message. It wasn't about their character. They were just people. When you see people like this, notice this is what Jesus is saying about these Pharisees and experts of the law. Now, the people, as we just saw, they rejoiced because they were baptized by John. They rejoiced because they had received God's righteousness. Now, Jesus blasts the Pharisees and the experts in the law. Why? Because you criticize John and you criticize Jesus. So which is it? Which is the evil? How do you define evil? Okay? How do you define evil? All right, we'll pick this up in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below all comments. So welcome, and I'll see you in the next study.